Hi everyone, and welcome to this video. In this clip, we're going to be looking at advanced user and group management. So I'm going to be following the script pretty closely for the users and groups lab so that it's going to illustrate hopefully pretty well what you were doing for that. So I've already got KW servers 1 and 2 booted up. I'm logged into that using administrative accounts. And we're going to start off right away in server 1 by creating those organizational units that are part of task 1. So I'm going to, in Tools, launch my Active Directory users and computers. And we'll get that up on the screen so that we can start creating the organizational units. So here we are. We can see our structure. We've got the domain. We've got that IT organizational unit that we created before. Here is computers, where we can see KW Server 2. And in domain controller is where we can see KW Server 1. Start off by creating the Kitchener and Calgary organizational units, part of step 1. So I'm going to simply right click on the domain. And when I do that, I'll have new and organizational unit. So here is Kitchener. I'm going to leave protect from accidental deletion selected so that we don't accidentally delete an OU and kill 1,000 user accounts in the process of doing that. We'll say OK, and here's Kitchener. Same thing, I'm going to create a new organizational unit called Calgary. All right, good to go. Kitchener, Calgary. Now, part of step 2 is each one of these organizational units is going to have 3 or more organizational units contained inside, users, servers, and endpoints. So if I select Kitchener as an example, we can see there's nothing here. I can right-click inside that pane, say I want new organizational unit, and I'm going to call this users. I will create another one, and we'll call this servers. And finally, I will create, oops, I put that in the wrong spot. All right, now, this one I need to have inside users, and I need to move that. So if I right-click on this, it's pretty easy to do. I can just right-click and say that I want to move. And I'm going to put this inside of Kitchener instead of inside of users. And when I do that, we'll see that we're going to get an access is denied message. The reason for that is in order to move, just like in a file, I would have to delete from here and create here. And because we've got accidental deletion prevented, I can't do that. So I show you how to deal with that. If you select the View menu and click on Advanced Features, that's going to show some additional containers over here, but most importantly, what will end up happening is when I, inside of users here, select servers and bring up its properties, I'm going to get some additional tabs. Object is the one that we're interested in here, because if I select that, we can see that protect object from accidental deletion is checked off. So I can uncheck that. I'll say OK. And then once that's done, I'll be able to move this object. So I'll right-click on servers. I'm going to move it. I'll pick Kitchener. And when I say OK, we are good to go. So servers is now inside Kitchener as well. As good practice, I'm going to bring the properties on servers back up again. And once I've done that, I'm going to go into Object and protect from accidental deletion and say OK. And then the last thing we'll do is we will create the endpoints organizational unit in Kitchener. So I'll say new organizational unit, endpoints, and go. So that's taken care of Kitchener. Calgary, haven't done anything with that yet. I'll do the same thing here. I'll create a new organizational unit called users. I'll create another new organizational unit called servers. And then finally, I'll create another organizational unit called endpoints. So we have a pretty good structure now set up whereby we can create whatever type of object we need and then delegate authority so that people can manage what we want them to be able to manage in our environment. Okay. So that's pretty much up for task 1. Now, getting on to task 2, we have to create a bunch of users and groups and kind of work out how that's going to do for us. So the first thing I need to do in step 1 is in Kitchener users, this container, I need to create here a standard user account for one of my users. So what I'm going to do is I'll right click, new user. Say my user is going to be Bonnie Smith. So Bonnie Smith, and my user login is going to be bsmith. I will set the password. And since I'm going to be messing around with this counter a little bit, I'm going to set it up so that we don't need to change the password. So I'll say OK, and we will finish that up. So here is my account for Bonnie. And then the next thing we're going to do, which is in step 2, is create an administrative user for Bonnie. And that's going to go in the IT organizational unit. So pick the IT OU. We can see the account that we created for ourselves when we did the post installation config along with that security group. So I'm going to do a right click here, new user. This is going to be Bonnie Smith as we had before. But if you remember from our discussions in class, the username for this is going to be bsmith-a. Go through, set the password, and same thing with the password manipulation like last time, and we'll get our Bonnie account. This one's going to be administrative. We can't really see that from here. So one thing that's kind of nice is I'm going to bring up my properties on Bonnie, and in the description, I'm going to say that this is the admin account. And then once that's done, we can see over here about the admin account in the description column, and that's going to make it a little bit easier for us to understand why we have 2 Bonnie Smiths. Right. So that takes care of step number 2. Step number 3, we want service desk staff global groups for roles, and we're going to have junior, intermediate, and senior. So remember we said that we're going to want a different security group for each one of the different roles that our staff are going to have. So I'll start off by right-clicking in the IT organizational unit. I'll say new group. This is going to be a global security group, and we're going to call this service desk staff junior. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing with our service desk staff intermediate. So new group, service desk staff intermediate. And then finally, for the roles, we'll do new and then group, service desk staff, and senior. Okay, so those are the roles. Now, once we've got that, we also need groups that are going to allow us to access things. In other words, this is the access control part of role-based access control. So in step 4, we're going to create 4 security groups. So there's going to be local admins servers, local admins printers, local admins endpoints, and then domain admins users. So basically, those locals are going to be related to the actual servers that are going to be providing those services out onto the network. And then the domain part is our senior team is going to be able to administer users throughout the entire domain. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to say I want to create yet another new group. So this is going to be local admins servers and new group local admins printers. Another new group local admins endpoints. And then finally, we will have, get this to pop up here, new group, and this will be domain admins users. Okay. And although I didn't do this here, a good idea for self-documentation is you would put a description of each one of those groups so that you would know, what they are and what they're going to be doing. So that finishes up step number 4. Now, the next thing we want to do is we're going to make, as per step 5, we're going to make the Service Desk Senior role group a member of all of these different local admins plus the domain admins users. So what I'm going to do is open the properties for Service Desk Senior. And then let me pull this over into the middle more here. I'm going to make this a member of a number of other groups. So I'm going to add in, and this is going to be local, so I'm just going to type in LOC. We can see that this is going to look in the Dixon.local domain. And I'll just say OK, and it'll give us a list of everything that starts with local. And I want all 3 of these. It would be great if I could just shift-click, pick them all, add it in, and we can see now that our senior admins for Service Desk is a member of all 3 of these. Plus, I want my domain admins users. So these are the 4 groups that we just got finished creating. And our senior team now has the ability to administer anything that these groups are going to have permissions or rights applied to. So I'll say OK for that. Now, what we need to do for our junior staff is they're going to be endpoints and they're going to be users only. So I will open the properties for Service Desk Staff Junior. Again, I'm going to say member of. I'll say add. And this is for local going to be, this pops up endpoints. And then I'm also going to add in the domain admins users. So these 2 access control groups are what the junior staff for the help desk role will be allowed to work with. And then finally, we have to do intermediate. So I'll pull up the properties for the Service Desk Staff Intermediate group. And I'm going to make this member of. In this particular case, I'll add. And for local, I'm going to be able to do endpoints and printers, but not servers. So I'll add those in. And then I will add in the domain admins users. So now our intermediate role group has whatever rights or permissions are assigned to these 3 access groups. So we're starting to really build a nice structure here for role-based access control. Right. Now, once we've got that finished, so that takes care of steps 6 and 7, what we want to do is delegate the domain admins users the ability to create and manage users in the users OUs inside Kitchener and inside Calgary. So basically this OU that we see up here for Calgary and this OU that we see down here in Kitchener. Right. We don't want to delegate that authority anywhere outside of those organizational units, because we don't want anybody just to be creating users here and there in any place. We set up the domain structure for a reason with organizational units, so we're going to make sure we use that. So I'm going to pick Calgary. I'll right-click on users, and then that will bring up delegate control, which will launch the delegate control wizard. I'll say next, past the welcome screen. Who am I going to add in from a security principle? This is going to be that domain admins users. So I'll expand this about so we can see it. Here it is right here. I'll add that in. That's the only group, so I'll carry on next. What I'm going to let them do, create, delete, manage users, create, delete, manage groups. Next, and finish. So now what's happened is anybody who is a member of that domain admins users group is going to be able to create and manage and delete users and groups in the users OU. Now, how can we see that? I'll show you something. This isn't in the lab, but just so you can see how this works. If I bring up the properties, one of the tabs for that organizational unit is going to be security. And I'm going to go into advanced security. And once that comes up on the screen, I'm going to sort this by the principal because I'm interested in the domain admins users and seeing everything that is pertinent for that. So if I scroll down here a bit, here are domain admins users. And by doing that delegation, basically what I've done is I've created 4 access control entries, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later. But it allows me to create, delete group objects. It allows me to create and delete user objects. And it allows me full control of any descendant group and user objects, meaning any group and user objects that are inside of this OU that I just created this delegation for, I can manage them and do anything I need to. I can change them, delete them, whatever. And that's what the result is for that delegation wizard. So one of the reasons I was mentioning that Active Directory users and computers is a little bit nicer for delegating control. In Active Directory Admin Center, what we have to do instead is actually go in and set those permissions. So you have to know what they are ahead of time, and that's a little bit of a pain. I'm going to say OK here, and then what we'll do is go down and repeat that process on the users OU on Kitchener. So again, I'm going to right-click. I am going to delegate control. Next, I will add in that domain admins users group, this guy here. Say OK. Next, I'm going to allow create, delete, and manage both users and groups. Next, and finish. And we've now just achieved exactly the same thing on that OU. If you had an organization that had a large number of different locations and you had a control or access control policy, basically what we're looking at here, for every one of those users containers, you would go through and add the delegated control. And that's pretty much all you have to do for that. All right. Now, next thing we have to do, that takes care of step 8. So step 9, we need to get over onto KW Server 2. So I'm just going to switch over to KW Server 2. And that's now timed out and locked. So I will log back in here. Notice I'm logged on with my admin account. And what we need to do here is allow a couple of things. This is another type of role-based access control, but instead of delegating rights within Active Directory, we're going to assign permissions or rights down onto a member server. So what I'm going to do, because I have to work with the local users and groups, I'm going to right-click and manage computer. There's a number of different ways you can get here. You can go through the users and groups control panel and advanced and all the rest of that type of thing. This is the easiest way that I find to do this. Once our server or computer management comes up on the screen, what we're going to do is expand out our local users and groups. And we can see from a user's perspective that we've got that service desk account, administrator, and guest. And then we have a whole bunch of groups over here. So if we look at step 9, that says we want to make the local admin servers group a member of administrators, this group here. So I'm going to bring up the properties of the local administrators group on KW Server 2. So in other words, this administrators group says who gets to administer this computer, not the domain, this computer. Properties, I can see my local administrator, I can see domain admins, I can see service desk. I'm going to add in. And again, this is looking at the Dixon.local domain, so I don't have to tell it where to search. I'll just say LOC like we were doing before. Here's a list of all of my local admins groups. We want local admins servers. I'll pick that. Add it in. And now we see the local admin servers group shows up in the list, which means anybody who is a member of this group or indirectly through some other nested group will have administrative rights onto this server. And that's all I need to do for that particular step. Okay. Now, while that's finishing up, if we look at step 10, what we want to do is allow the printers admins to manage printers on this server. So notice that there is a group here called print operators. And this is a pre-configured group that Microsoft has set up so it's got all the rights you need to manage any printers that are served off of this server. If I bring up the properties of this particular group, we'll see that there are no members at this point in time, but we can certainly fix that. We'll add in, and again, I'll say local, and that will pop up our list, and I'm going to pick local admins printers. So by doing that, anybody who is a member either directly or indirectly of this group will be able to administer printers on this system. And we'll say OK. Now, if you remember, we made the intermediate help desk staff or service desk staff able to manage printers, but not servers. Therefore, the people who are part of the intermediate role or have the intermediate role will be able to log in and manage the printers, but not everything on the server. On the other hand, those who are part of the senior role will be able to get in through that administrators association and do anything on this server. That takes care of step number 10. Step number 11, we basically want to repeat what we did with our local server admins over on our domain controller. So I'm going to shift gears here for a second and go back to server 1. If I look in my built-in groups in Active Directory users and computers, here is that administrator's account. We also have something though, if I don't want full administrative control on the entire system, we have this thing called server operators, which will let us do most actions, but not everything. And my senior folks, I'm going to set them up so that they have server operators, not administrators. So on step 11, you'll notice that this is the group we want to add them to. So I'm going to, again, bring up the properties. If I look at my members, I can see that we don't have any. I'm going to add. Again, we'll say local. And here is my local admin servers. Grab that and say OK and OK. And now anybody who is either directly or indirectly into that local admin servers group will have server operators capability on this machine. All right. So that takes care of step number 11. Right. Now the other thing we want to do is we've got this computer, server 2, which is right now in this generic computers container. And this is a server that is in our Kitchener location. In order to allow our Kitchener admins to administer this guy, they're not going to be able to get access here because this is underneath the domain. So what we're going to do is move this computer so that it's in the server's organizational unit in Kitchener. So all I need to do is I'll right-click that. I'll say I want to move it. Where do I want to move this? Kitchener servers. OK. And we can see in the computers container, our computer's no longer there. If I look in servers, in Kitchener, here is KW Server 2. So therefore, if I give admin rights to server admins on this container, then that means automatically they're going to, whatever rights I allow in Active Directory on this container, they will be able to perform on this particular server in our Active Directory environment. Takes care of step number 12. Now, next thing, step number 13. What we're going to do is take that admin account we made for Bonnie, and we're going to give her senior level service desk rights. Back to the IT organizational unit. Here's Bonnie. Right click on Bonnie, and I'm going to add her to a group. This is going to be part of the service desk. So here's service desk senior. I'll pick that, and Bonnie is in. If I go back and look at Bonnie's properties, member of, here's senior service desk staff, so that's her role. And if we look at it the other way, from senior service desk perspective, members, Bonnie. So Bonnie's our only senior admin. And now, because Bonnie is a member of senior service desk staff, that means that she will now get all the rights and permissions that have been assigned to all of these 3 local domain groups we made here for local admin servers, local admins printers, local admins endpoints, and also the domain group that we created here for domain admins users. So that now takes takes up step 13. So let's see what happens when we actually try to work with this. So in step 14, we want to log on to KW Server 2 with Bonnie's non-admin account. So let's see if we can do that. I'm going to pop over here onto Server 2. I am going to, from this guy, log out as me. And then I'm going to log in as Bonnie. So B Smith, secret 55, oops. Secret 55. I think I typed that enough times by now, I wouldn't mess it up. And while we're here in step 14, we can see that we were able to log in. Now, can Bonnie do anything that requires administrative rights without her admin account? So what I'm going to do is bring up computer management, and we will open local users and groups. Here's the users container. Right click, new user. I'll say this is going to be my test user. Not Iser, user. Put in a password. And we'll say create. And we get an access denied error because Bonnie, the standard user, has no administrative rights on this system. So for step number 15, basically, yeah, we were not successful. We had a failure there, and we tried to do that. Now, what about Bonnie's admin account? So we'll get out of here. We're going to log out as Bonnie, the standard user, and we're going to log in as Bonnie, the admin user. So we're going to say bsmith-a for the admin account. And in we go. So step 19 is now complete. We logged in as, not step 19. Step 16 is now complete. We were able to log in as Bonnie, the admin user, on server 2. Now, while we're here, let's try doing the same thing for creating a local user. So I'm going to bring up computer management. We're going to go into local users and groups and users. And I'm going to try to do this new user. So again, this is going to be our test user. Put in our password. And create, no error. I'll close this out, and sure enough, here is our test user. So again, roles. Bonnie, the standard user, does not have any special role. She didn't have permission to create the user account. Bonnie the admin, on the other hand, with that account, was a member of the service desk senior staff role, and that role, because of its server, local server admins, has basically full administrative rights on this server, therefore can create a local user on the server. Okay, so that takes us through to step number 17. Okay. Now, we'll go on to step 18. What we have to do is try and log onto the domain controller using Bonnie's not-admin account. So I'm going to switch back over on KW Server 1, and I'm going to log out as me. And I'm going to try to log in as Bonnie, the standard user. And we get a message that says that we're not allowed to sign in. There is a policy on domain controllers that standard users cannot even sign into them. Fair enough. So for step 18, basically we had a failure there. So let's try step 19. We want to try and log in as Bonnie the admin user. So I'm going to change users here. I'll do bsmith-a and secret 55. And sure enough, we are able to log in using Bonnie's admin account. So in step 19, we were successful. Okay. Now, step 20, what we want to do is open Active Directory users and computers. So I'll just pop that up. Once it manages to search for it, here we are here, Active Directory users and computers. Notice, because this is not a straight up administrative account, we're trying to do something that requires admin rights. We actually have to authenticate for that. So I'm going to have to put in Bonnie's username and password before it even lets us open Active Directory users and computers. Okay, so we're up and running. Expand out. Now, what we want to do in step 20 is we're going to try and create a user account in the IT organizational unit. So I select that. Here is a list of our current users and groups. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to say I want to, oh, look at that. There is no new option, and that function's not there because Bonnie does not have any admin rights on that particular organizational unit. So the answer to that one, obviously, is we can't actually go ahead and create or manage anything in this particular organizational unit. Okay. Now, on the other hand, step 21, if we go to Kitchener and we look at the users here, what's here right now is Bonnie, but can Bonnie actually do anything with users here? So I'm going to right click. Hey, new is back. That's awesome. And we only can create users and groups. So if you remember, when I was logged in with my account, we said new. There was quite a list of objects here, right? There was users, there was computers, there was groups, there was organizational units, all kinds of things like that. Bonnie doesn't have that level of rights. She basically is limited to users and groups. But if we want to try this out, I can say let's create a new user. Let's do a user here as well, which is going to be test user. And we'll put in a user name for that. Go next. Put in a password. And next and finish. And there is our new user account. So Bonnie has the rights to be able to work with users in the users organizational unit underneath Kitchener, not IT, not on the domain. So this has been a fairly long and drawn out look at a number of different things we can do to initiate role-based access control. So remember, we've got roles. There's going to be a group that represents the role for each user. Each user should only be in one role group. And then we have a number of different access control groups. We put the role groups that can actually exercise that particular action that is specified by the access control group inside or make it a member of that access control group. And then all of those permissions and rights are passed on because of that group membership so that users have different abilities to be able to execute certain functions and at the same time, not others. So that probably looks a little bit cumbersome, and to get it thought out to begin with and set up to begin with, a little bit cumbersome. But believe me, that little bit of short-term pain is well worth the long-term gain you're going to get over the lifetime of administering your systems. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. This is the end of the video, and we'll see you next time.